Hey there droid fans, welcome back again to my Astromech. So I'm still self-isolating here in my lab, doing my part during this COVID-19 madness. I know that it's a real sacrifice and a hardship for some of you, but I was recently reminded that I've been practicing social distancing my whole life, so I'm kind of used to this. All joking aside though, I really am thankful that I've got something to keep me occupied, and I know that there's plenty of people right now out there with really good reason to complain. When I left off last time, I had the tub cleaned up and primed and all the main features assembled on the top. Now I want to move on to the ends. The front includes a holo projector like the one seen on the R6 Astromechs. Of course, I've already modeled this piece for my R6 droid. The back of the scrubber includes a box frame kind of thing with what looks like exhaust of some sort and various greeblies. I'm going to start with the front and the holo and then move on to the back. As I said, I already had the holo modeled, so I just had to print one out and finish it. I also needed to model this mounting plate that you see. Okay, so I've put together this holo assembly. I wanted to assemble and paint this thing off the droid just to avoid having to mask all this metallic paint finish here on the base. My plan is to have some really simple animation to this thing when I'm done. Probably just a single servo setup, maybe with a spring return, something like that. And I just finished printing the box that'll be attached to the back end of the droid. That'll be mounted before paint, and then I'll put the greeblies on after. So this is the part that I modeled and printed for the back of the droid. It's pretty straightforward, nothing too fancy. But there is a couple of issues here that I just wanted to address. The first thing is just a fairly minor printing failure. I just have an issue with this one corner. That's going to be easy enough to fix. I'm not even concerned about that. But something that I forgot, or actually never even really thought about, was the fact that this surface of the tub is nowhere near flat. Yeah, I just didn't take that into consideration. I considered printing a spacer to go behind this box frame thing. to try to match that contour, but I think the easiest way to fix that, and I'll fix this problem at the same time, is to use probably 2-part epoxy putty or something. So I'm going to put a bead of, or an epoxy worm around the outside edge, and then just press it in and let it naturally conform to the shape of that. And then I'll go back and carve it away or do whatever body shopping I need to do to make that look like a solid piece. I plan to attach this back box to the tub using epoxy and a few screws. In order for the epoxy to take hold of the tub, I went back to remove some of the primer that I'd applied. If you watched my earlier scrubber video, you might remember that I had some concerns about finding a primer that would bond well to the HDP that this toad is made from.
And it was at that moment when I began to reconsider all of my life choices.
When I used compressed air to clean off the area that I just sanded, the air got up under the primer and it peeled it right off the tote. In the video, you can see me weighing my options before I decided to dive right in and see if any of it grabbed. In the end, I chose to take it right down to the plastic, and I went at this thing with 120 psi air, a wire brush, and my die grinder. Okay, so I got that loose primer knocked off of this thing. I'm really not too sure what to make of what I just saw. The spots where it was coming off, it blew off really quite easy, but there were some spots where it was really holding on tightly to this tote. I thought that I did a pretty good job of prepping the surface. For sure, whatever I'd done, I did it evenly across the whole thing. But like I said, there were some spots where it was actually tough to get the primer off. I know right from the beginning, I had some reservations on using that primer. I haven't used it on this kind of material before, and I really wasn't sure how it was going to work. I guess if I'm being honest, I'm glad that it failed when it did and not when I had the whole thing finished. I am going to keep plugging away, but this time I'm actually doing a couple tests before I go any further and see if I can find something that'll actually grip this stuff. And after experimenting for 2 days, I've come up with a process that seems to be working okay. It's hard to say if all of these steps are necessary, but this is what I've done. First, I hit the whole thing with 60 grit sandpaper just to give it as much bite as possible, and then I washed it down again with acetone. Then, working in one small area at a time, I warmed the plastic up with a torch and dusted on a light coat of primer from the auto parts store. This stuff was labeled as being good for plastic bumper covers. I heated this primer coat again with a torch before moving on to the next area. After letting that set up for about 12 hours, I went over the whole thing with a standard primer coat, and then I let that dry overnight again. This process passed the fingernail test, but it's still not the best bond ever. Finally, I put down a unifying coat of gray primer that brought me right back to where I was a few days ago. And I think I'm gonna leave this video right there. I didn't get nearly as far as I thought that I would after my primer mishap, but I feel like I've probably recovered from that now. I will say that after stripping it down and redoing the primer, I'm glad that this is gonna be weathered quite a bit. That should help to hide some of the crimes that happened during my fix. Next time I'll be finishing off the small details and getting on with the weathering, which is something that I'm really looking forward to. As always, if you like this content, please consider subscribing and liking. And until next time, remember, there is no try.